Hi everyone, welcome back. I have to say I am so excited about this panel because we're going to be hearing from people from the music industry on how we can decarbonise and using their voice to raise awareness of climate change. So on the panel we have Carly McLaughlin from the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change. We've got Faye Milton, who is a Savages drummer and also founder of Music Declares an Emergency. We've got A.Y. Young, who is a UN Youth Ambassador and has been playing some of the evenings at the Ferry. And then chairing, we've got Katie Johnson, who's a Capital FM DJ for Scotland.
Thank you very much. So, as you heard, I'm Katie J, and welcome to the Extreme Hangout powered by OVO. If you've been kicking about all day, I'm sure that you know where you are. But we are here at the Ferry in Glasgow with a background of COP26 on the Clyde to talk about sustainable pleasures and life beyond carbon. Now, specifically, we've arrived at this, as I say, amazing venue with a panel of experts to have a discussion about the zero carbon future of music. So thank you so much for joining us and, of course, tuning in online. As amazing and life-changing as music can be, we've missed it so much, haven't we? Live music. What a thing. What a concept. The scale of events and the carbon produced by touring can be really, really worrying. But the music industry is listening and taking action. From Coldplay to Billie Eilish and Massive Attack, artists are working with organisations to find low-carbon ways to bring the music we love to our ears. So today, we'll hear from expert panellists on what is being done to lower the carbon footprint of the music industry. So let's hear from them. Carly, Faye, A.Y., thank you so much for coming along and being a part of this panel. I just think it's best if I let you introduce yourselves. So A.Y., take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Voice is like not working the best today. Yo, but I'm A.Y., founder of the Battery Tour, and then I'm one of the 17 United Nations Young Leaders for the SDGs. So Mina Mohammed, Antonio Guterres designated me. So happy to be at COP, and it's crazy because I'm actually the only young leader of the 17 here at COP representing, the envoy office. So.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah.
The only one.
Guys, like push for the 17 leaders here, young leaders. So thank you.
Thank you. I am Faye Milton, co-founder of Music Declares Emergency, which is a group of music industry, artists and organisations campaigning against climate change, basically, and committing to greening the industry. And I'm a drummer and musician in a band called Savages, and other projects.
It's just amazing. I'm so excited to hear more about what you've been up to. Carly, your turn.
I'm Carly McLaughlin. So I am not in the music industry. I'm a researcher. So I lead a climate change research centre at the University of Manchester. We're called the Tyndall Centre for Climate Change Research. And we've done lots of work around trying to get research kind of working with policymakers and have policy relevant research. And so we were approached by Massive Attack to look at how they could reduce emissions in their own tour, but then also how they could work with their colleagues and friends across the sector to try and drive emissions down. So we've recently produced a roadmap for super low carbon live music, and I'll talk a bit more about that when we get into it.
Carly, I'm not in the music industry, but I'm pals with Massive Attack. All right. Right, I've got some questions here for you guys, and then we'll turn to the audience for questions and some questions from online as well. So let's just kick off and get into this, because I know you've all got so much to say. What progress would you say has been made that makes you feel positive that we can keep global warming within 1.5 degrees? Who's up for this one first? It's a biggie.
I'm happy to go. I think the best progress that I've sort of clocked in the last couple of years is that the conversation around climate has completely changed. And there are so many more people who, everyone really now wants urgent climate action. That's just across the board. And you can have a conversation about it in any pub or venue or high street across the country and probably across the world. So it's the conversation around it. A few years ago, it was so frustrating trying to tell people.
Oh my God, tell me about it, girl. Woo!
That you screaming into the mic.
Yeah, that sums it up, that reaction. If you've been thinking about this for a while, you're just like, why can't anyone hear us? But yeah, so that's, for me, that's like the biggest progress. But obviously actions need to follow those words.
And I'm gonna second that, because so I found the battery tour like back in 2012, right? So I started powering all my concerts using 100% renewable energy. I've done like close to 900, right? Like 230 before the pandemic. But as of like 2 years ago, people were like, well, that's a renewable artist. I was like, what? Like, that never happened. You know, it's like, oh, that's a sustainable musician. I was like, what? You know, like, so, and there was like a time period too when like I noticed on like Instagram and stuff, like girls are like doing yoga selfie, you know, eating healthy, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was just like this thing, you know, that just kind of swept through. And so what I'll say is what's happening is the music industry, influencers on social media, agents, you know, the managers are saying, hey, well, why don't you say something about that inequality, you know, or hey, take a picture, you know, without a plastic spoon, you know what I'm saying? Like nowadays, like sometimes you eat like with plastic spoon or something, you know, you'll get like massacred online. What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, like it's, you know what I'm saying? And that's what's happening, is it's starting to become cool to be sustainable.
But do you think is that tokenistic or is that genuine? You know, that reaction. Oh, the reaction's genuine, but people say about plastic spoons and pictures on Instagram. Have you experienced anyone like reacting like that to anything that you've ever posted? No, or
like what are you doing with that plastic? I mean, well, not me specifically, but my narrative is more like every day I'm an outlet for change, and I'm doing the best I can day to day, and then I showcase it, right? So, you know, I'm like, this is the steps to take as an outlet, right? This is the action that I'm taking, and this is what I'm doing because I'm powered by like these renewable energy contracts from the street corner. Like Battery Tour has never been powered by like Tesla or Walmart. You know, I don't have a bunch of money to travel this way or that. You know, so for me it's been like that. But I don't know what you guys have seen. Now I have seen that on the internet for other people. Yeah. You know, like what But I think that's a good tone because now you have to start standing for something and showing. But it also can provide cloaks, and people can be fake, right? I mean, I want to hear from you guys, like on your thoughts. Go ahead.
I mean, I think the thing that makes me feel like, you know, sort of optimistic is that sense of people stepping up and actually going beyond. Like, it's not their responsibility necessarily, not being called out to do it. They realise that what they're doing in whatever sector is part of something that's far too high carbon. And so using your direct control, so the decisions that you make yourself about your tour and where you go, but then also using throwing your net as wide as you can to bring other people into that and make the change more systematic. I think there's a really clever trick that's been played on kind of individuals, that if you express any view that is about, you know, pro-environmentalism, and then you do anything that somebody might think isn't sustainable enough, well, that just proves that nothing that you ever did was worth it. You know, like it's like you've got to be held to a standard that is pretty impossible, given that the system we have is deeply carbon intensive. And that's, in my view, like a trick that is played by incumbents and vested interests to make people feel disempowered. And so actually people stepping up and saying, I'm gonna make this change. It's not perfect, we're not zero carbon, but we've halved our carbon. Like, well, great. And we're going to talk about it, we're going to share that, and we're going to amplify and scale what we're doing. That makes me feel optimistic that those ripples can really make a big change.
Hear, hear. I think that's an excellent point, Carly. So we've kind of touched on influencers. What about the music industry and people making a big difference and, as you say, kind of making ripples in their world? Music is such a huge part of our life. Especially now we realise how much we've missed being out there, enjoying the artists we love. What role can these artists play in the fight against climate change? AY, you are an artist yourself. Yeah. Same with you, Faye. What kind of, have you seen tangible results when you've been out there?
I think when you love an artist and you listen to their lyrics, listen to their music, you really feel like you're getting to know them because the artist is being vulnerable, letting you know them with their art. So when then an artist speaks out about something, it's like a friend speaking out. So you're much more likely to trust them than, say, a politician or, you know, someone that you don't have that connection with. So I think that's like a great power that artists have, is to really get, they're already in people's hearts and minds, whatever. True. But it's using that, infiltration to put out a positive message. It sounds really sneaky when I say that.
I mean, when you think about your favourite musicians, bands, you're so invested in their lyricism, you're invested in their lives. It makes sense that if they are passionate about, any given project, that you would too have a vested interest because you love them, right?
And I think change comes from passion. And so in order for change to happen, it comes from passion. Now you're saying, well, what can an artist do? Well, definitely lead by example. And it's funny you brought up Billie Eilish. I had the pleasure, Billie put me on her guest list, right? I was able to see her first 2 shows back, Global Citizen, another festival, and really watch. And cause we're doing this Project 17 where I'm bringing the world's biggest artists together, 17 songs, 17 major artists, right? This whole Project 17 is why I'm wearing this. But, an example of what she can do is lead by action, but power and support change by using her voice and then taking an action. Now you're seeing Coldplay take an action, which is wonderful, And I'll say I wouldn't be here, guys, on the top of stuff. How everybody doing? I wouldn't be here, right? If it wasn't time. You have to understand, 10 years, like close to 900 concerts, 100%. Power, and all of a sudden now I'm a young leader in the last year. All of a sudden I'm shaking Al Gore's hand, you know what I'm saying? Kicking it with, think about that. Dude, I've been doing this. So the fact that I'm sitting in this chair, bro, right? The fact that I'm on Billie Eilish's guest list, and the fact that I did the inauguration for Biden, right? And I don't have 1 million followers, which is why I tell people and the youth around the world and everyone that you don't have to have 1 million followers to make an impact. You don't have to have 50,000, because I don't. Right? And everyone has a passion. Hey, what up? You know what I'm saying? So, clearly something's changing. Yeah.
It's amazing. And just rattling off all the things that you've achieved, it's just fantastic. How does it feel to get that recognition, though? Does it jar with you slightly that you're like, hey, I've been doing this the whole time, as you say before, or is it just awesome to be friends with Billie Eilish?
Well, Billie and her team is great. Brian Marquis, Dan. I'm really blessed. It's also the people around too. But there's so many people in companies, corporations, Coca-Cola, whatever companies, whatever. I know there's bad and good, but there's humans. Right, that work for Unilever. There's humans that work for Samsung. There's humans and I'm seeing the change in humanity wanting to make a change. So but I'll say, Spider-Man's like with great power comes great responsibility, and people like us are now having great power. So I just feel responsibility. You're in a position. People ask me all the time, well, you're the only young leader of America. How are you going to be the voice of the youth? And it's like, dude, I'm not, bro. I'm never going to be the voice of but it's like, how do I, provide a platform for people to plug into all facets of humanity, to then take an action to power and support change. I just use the SDGs as a framework. So, and by the way, Billie's just a person, right? Everyone's the same. We're all humans. You cut yourself, it's going to bleed red. I could care less if you have 10 million, 100 million, $5, 5 followers, you're a kid in the classroom. It does not matter. It's irrelevant. We have to come together to make collective action. We need to break down these bridges or break down these silos and create bridges. And that's what music does. That's what Music Declares does, right? That sounds like what the Cocoa place is doing here. By the way, Extreme is doing that. Get a round of applause for Extreme because you guys are amazing. I've been watching it all week. Right? So, that's what we have to do, and art is a big part of it. It's steps, I think.
I couldn't agree more, actually. It's like, one of the things is getting people with huge influence like Billie Eilish, and that's one of the things that we do. It's use that influence, but also it is about everyday people. And we've just done this amazing project with choirs around the UK, and they're just everybody from all walks of life, really a huge, you couldn't find that mix at any concert. And all of those people engaging in climate, in music, is so powerful. It doesn't have to be sort of from on high, which is this very kind of hierarchical system that doesn't really apply. anymore.
And those are people that have come together purely because they're passionate about music. And I'm sure that, I mean, I've been in choirs, and you know, it's a broad mix of abilities that come along, but there's the love, there's the passion. And how did it feel to kind of cut through that and get people talking about bigger issues alongside it?
It just felt brilliant. It felt so exciting to hear the opinions and the thoughts of people that you never get to hear the thoughts of. There was a choir called the Choir with No Name, and they're all unhoused people, very vulnerable people, talking about climate change. There was just people you never get to hear their opinions because you don't cross paths necessarily, or you do cross paths but you don't speak to each other. So it was just, yeah, it's kind of really counter to that attitude that you have to, as you're saying, like have 1 million followers to influence. No, you can influence in so many ways and so many people. And music can really create those networks as well, which is exciting.
Can we just give a round of applause for Faye and that amazing work? 'Cause that just sounds absolutely incredible. I mean, my goodness. Wow.
If anyone wants to get involved, hashtag sing the change.
Sing the change, brilliant. Carly, anything to kind of add to that discussion? If any artists that you look up to, if they started speaking about climate change, would it inspire you?
I think it's hugely powerful, and I thought the way that you expressed it's totally right about, you know, it's like a friend telling you, and I think that's, you know, that's the thing that we can all be doing. And I think there's often a sense, like I get asked to do like little snippets on, you know, what can people do? It's COP, so what can people do? And it's always framed as like what they can buy differently, and it's like that is just not all we are. Like we create society, like we are voters, we're citizens, we're parents, we're friends. Like we can do all these different things to make a difference. And I think music, you know, music is one part of that. And the thing that's, I think, exciting in the sector at the moment is that people, lots of artists, I think, really get it. Like they understand the technical stuff around carbon in music. And so you've got people stepping up and saying, like, we're going to deliver those emissions reductions, we're going to help other people in the sector, and we're going to talk about it. And you have to do that together. You have to be delivering in a meaningful way, I think, to have the credibility. That's true of, that's not just picking on music, that's for everybody. There's no point using your platform if you don't also have a path to really cutting your emissions. Not net zero, much more about the zero please and less about the net. So actually get your emissions down as low as you possibly can. If anybody tells you that they are net zero, like on Tuesday, I would be suspicious of that, you know. So like big corporations that are saying, you know, our net zero date, and they're just getting earlier and earlier and earlier, like they'll be in the past soon. And you just have to really look at like, what are they actually doing? You want the line below that of like, what's the actual emissions reduction? Because there's so much uncertainty about that net part of it, that negative emissions part of it. But yeah, as long as you deliver and use your voice, I think that power is incredible.
Say like, okay, because like when you're saying that, I'm thinking about, okay, if I'm a musician, I'm watching you, or if I'm one of these DJs that are coming tonight or whatever for the Coco thing or whatever, how do I do that? There's organizations to help, right? I know of Ocean and Global, they're a partner of mine, right? Reverb is a partner of mine, right? Reverb actually is interesting, you know, work with Billie Eilish, Lumineers, right? Tanner, all the, they have a lot of different ways of like, okay, this is how you can tour more sustainably as an artist and make those impacts. I think there's a difference though, right, between like the carbon impact thing and then like music, lyrics, right, and things like that. Because when I look at music, you know, and this is I think what makes my music special and different is I think the message isn't there in music right now. You know, like when I turn on the radio, it's like, you know, stuff about money and girls and like all this. I don't really see nobody talking about saving the planet, you know, and it's not necessarily that cool yet. You know, it's starting to be where like I think if it hits the desk, or these labels are like, well, you gotta say something, but just say it on Instagram, okay? We gotta sell this record, you know what I'm saying? You know, so I think, you know, and I think that's maybe what I'm standing for, starting to say, okay, you know, this is what we should be, and this is cool too, right? You know.
Do you get people reaching out to you and saying, oh, you know, because of your music, I've done X, Y, and Z to improve my climate footprint? Do you get that?
Totally. I mean, this record, We Can Change the World, man, I did this for Goal 17 with the head and the heart. you know, and like I keep talking about, man, you know, it's the goal to hopefully we can get like Paul McCartney on it by the end of the year and Miley, right? Because it's all about coming together. Like, you know, we can come together and we have to, right? That's what COP is, you know. This is what, you know, but I've heard so many people say that or save the planet, like, you know, made them think more about recycling or whatever, you know. But that's just my music. You gotta hear it, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. But yeah, I mean, but that's because music is a universal language. I just came from Saudi Arabia, and there were the girl, you know, the girls, they got the, you know, they're wearing this, and then the dudes, and they were all dancing. You know, it's me and Gloria Gaynor, I Will Survive Lady. It was random. I was like, girl, I love that song. I was like, oh my God, you get it. But you know what I'm saying? Like, but they were dancing. Like, bro, people were like, don't go to Saudi Arabia and die. And they're a contributor to a degree with the oil, but they also have green initiatives. It's crazy. And women are driving now. You know, it's like, but because there are a lot of people in Saudi Arabia that actually want to regenerate the planet. But music brought it. Right? Yeah. Crazy.
And you're watching them responding to your music. Oh, what a surreal experience. That's brilliant. Amazing. Carly, as you mentioned before about the concept of zero and companies kind of claiming that we're going to do it yesterday, what innovations have you guys seen in the music industry that will make us move closer to that zero carbon future?
Sure. Okay. So we looked at three things in our roadmap. So we looked at like how you travel and move stuff about, whether that's people or equipment. We looked at energy consumption in buildings or at like a festival venue, and we looked at audience travel. And so there's stuff in all of those. But like everything to do with sustainability and climate change, the first thing to do across all of it is do less of it if you can. So avoiding doing something. So if that's moving less stuff or fewer people, that is the first thing to do. And it's the easiest way to reduce emissions. But obviously, if you want to have live music, and I do, then you need to get on with doing it in a lower carbon way once you've got rid of the sort of stuff that you maybe don't need to do at all. So things like routing, you can get a bit out of your emissions by routing more effectively and thinking about carbon in the routing. You can design your tour right from its inception so it doesn't require a private jet. Now, obviously, most people who work in the music industry do not fly around in private jets. So it really pisses people off that we talk about private jets all the time. But they're so carbon intensive that if you really want to do this and put this central in a super low carbon tour, I think you should route it so that you don't have private jets in it. If Leonardo DiCaprio, who apparently came to COP on a commercial flight, I don't know if that's true because I mean, you probably know Leo, but I don't. You know, if that's true, if who is more famous than Leonardo DiCaprio? Like, I think if he can come on a commercial flight, then that's a reasonable ask. But actually, one of the really cool things that Massive Attack did, and they'd done this before they came and worked with us, was that when they were doing a tour in the US, when they were on the two coasts, basically, yes, they flew to get there, but then when they were there, they went by train between their gigs, and they build that into how they plan like a tour in Europe and things like that. So that makes a big difference. On the building stuff, you know, that's what we're talking about across decarbonising everything. So it's about, you know, getting more renewables on site, making things more energy efficient, looking at whether you could have plug and play stuff. And then for the audience travel, for festivals, they're kind of exciting because what we recommend is that festivals look to mirror the grid for its carbon intensity, right? So in the UK, it's like the biggest success story of decarbonisation that we've managed to like half the grid emissions in the last decade. So there's still more to do, but of all the sectors, it's the one that had clear policy and they drove emissions down. So if you're burning diesel at your festival, then your grid emissions, the comparison to the grid emissions is getting worse over time because diesel's staying the same carbon intensity and the grid's getting lower and lower. And so we're just saying as like a challenge to the people making the technology for that, whether it's about solar and batteries or whatever it is, to try and mirror the grid. So to get a grid connection, that's the other way to do it. And then in the audience part, it's about, I think, making it like the easiest and most fun way to get to the gig. And then once you have that in place, and that's about all kinds of partnerships with local authorities and transport providers and things like that, you've got to also, and this is the bit we often shy away from in climate change, you've got to make the thing you don't want people to do less convenient, more expensive, less fun. So, you know, there's been attempts to try and like shut car parks around big gigs and stuff like that in order to say, not only do we want you to come on the train or on the tram or on the bus or on your bike, on your feet, you actually just can't park. So you're going to do one of those things, you know. So I think sometimes we don't reach to those tools because we're kind of a bit. Obviously, you've got to sort out accessibility issues and like that. Some people have to be able to park, but you know, for the majority of your gig goers, they don't need to be able to. So I think there's loads of innovation across all those three areas that people are doing, and it's just about ramping that up and scaling it.
Amazing, yeah. No, it was a brilliant answer. It was it was thorough. It was fantastic. But it's mad, isn't it, that you have to literally go, okay, no, we're going to block the car park so you can't get in, and that's the way that's going to motivate people. But still, you'd get them parking on the street and getting a ticket. I mean, how do you change that mindset? It's you know, endlessly frustrating. You see, as you said, mentioned local authorities, things like free bus travel and things like that. Is that the kind of changes?
Yeah, and like, you know, you have things where like the gig finishes just after the last train. Like, don't do that. You know, like connect that better. And I think that's, you know, local authorities in the UK.
Organizer notes, essentially, because like what you're saying is so many layers, you know, like when you go, like say Global Citizen, you know, when I went there, you know, and it was leaving on the train, you know, they had the trains all available in New York. Like it was like they had talked to the government, you know, but like, and not every organizer can do that. So just throw it in. But you're right, that needs to be like, if you are an organizer, if you are a talent, try to take this step in your planning.
Yeah, but also like the local authority or the transport provider, it's a key actor in this too. So if it wants to drive low carbon transport in its locality, it needs to be having the conversations with the venues and things like that. In the local authorities in the UK, there's been this real big move towards declaring a climate emergency. Well, part of that declaration should be that you're making sure that events that come to your authority are facilitated to do the lowest carbon thing. So it's not all about artists. Like they I think hold a really heavy burden on this, that like it's down to them. Like there's all these actors making the sector work or not work, and it's right across the piece. So like the work that we do, our roadmap and stuff, is about all of those. It's not just down to artists. And there's also this really different power dynamic. And I think sometimes when big artists speak out and say that they want to do something, you often get a little bit of a grumble about, well, you know, smaller artists can't do that and they don't have the same power. But I think, what would you want those people with that power to do more than make the change for you so that it's easier for you to move into that space? So it shouldn't be kind of threatening. Actually, those big artists should be able to leave more of a legacy for other people coming up, you know, and growing at the moment. So if you're really powerful in the sector, like use it, great, you know, because that helps. And it's like you say, it's more difficult for some artists to kind of make that big difference. But it's whatever you can throw your net over and whatever you can change, I think.
Brilliant again, Carly. I've got to give you a round of applause. Faye, do you have anything to add to this, what people can do to be closer to zero carbon?
Yeah, well, I think what you were just saying has made me feel like it reminded me of that moment where I was like, that's what systemic change means. Like for years I've been like, yeah, we need systemic change, but it's this nebulous thing. You're not like really that sure what it is. If someone asks you to define it, you'd be like, but yeah, you can't be an artist and be zero carbon because the system doesn't work like that. It's about the train network, it's about the local authority, and you've got to make music at some point. You can't do all of those things by yourself. So that's sort of like a smaller sort of industry level version of what the whole world needs. So that kind of systemic change, all these things working together, all these moving parts. And we had a conference recently called the Climate Music Blowout. And one of the things that came out of a lot of the panels on that was that if musicians didn't have to, a lot of the most polluting things that musicians do is because they're not making enough money from their actual music. So music basically is free now. Anyone can just access it for free. So instead you have to make tons of merch, create loads of t-shirts, you have to tour relentlessly, you have to market to the entire world in one go, flying around the entire planet, playing shows in Singapore and places you've never thought to go. And if actually enough money was made available to artists to live off from their music, then...
And there is, not to cut you off, but also to add to what you're saying, is like, she's exactly right. Listen to what she's actually saying. And, you know, it's in front of your eyes. Like when you see Taylor Swift redoing her album, right? Just click it. so she can make the money that she should have made. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So maybe, just maybe in the business, people aren't as well off as they should be to then make, just saying. So when you're looking at a day and age where it's a paradigm shift in like every facet. Like I tell people all the time, like, cause you know, we're bringing like the biggest corporations in the world together for this project, you know, and I'm so happy to have Samsung now and Enel Green Power or whatever. But when you get in, when you start getting inside, I start noticing stuff like, oh shoot, for years, like corporations literally pay people a lot of money to be like, how do we run this more efficiently? How do we make more money? How do we just get, you know, like they're just trying to figure out how to do more and more and scale. Like we're in a new day and age where I'm realizing that dude might get fired, bro. And actually, he probably doesn't want to lose his job. You know what I'm saying? And now they got to probably hire someone to be like, how do we make sure that the food they eat is actually good for their body? How do we make sure that the food that produced is like produced? This is a whole, you know what I'm saying? This is crazy all at the same time. Wow, bro. And now you got people like Chance the Rapper, right? People like Macklemore who paved the way earlier, independent artists that are on the mainstream, they're on the radio. You have to understand music business, like the music, you know, this is why I tell my artists is like, you realize that like, they're supposed to own that before it hits the, you know, they own the mat. This is what Prince changed his name for, right? So like, think of this is right in front of us. You know, I mean, come on, bro. So like you in a new day and age where now because of Mark Zuckerberg, now because of, you know, how you can put music out, you can actually put it out and own it. But the consumers have to help make it relevant. A guy like me can be doing this all day long, but if you're not supporting someone who's doing, you know, then if you're going to go buy the Migos record, and I love Migos, they're great, you know, and I wish Migos could even make more money than they probably make from their record label deal, you know, like those power to those guys. But like, you know, then the guy, you know, who's, you know, making sustainable music might not be able to keep doing it. That's why I've been on the street corner for 10 years.
Goodness. But you know, it's so powerful what you're saying as well about the kind of people with the platform. And you know, I love Taylor Swift, so of course I'm going to get hung up on this one. But that ownership and that, you know, what you expect that they're getting, you know, obviously she's a millionaire, I'm sure, but you know, that way, that it's so fascinating. It's things that as a consumer, you're right, we don't think about until we're confronted with it.
And be like, oh, well, why is she doing this? And then right in front of your eyes, she's redoing her album and saying, hey guys, please listen to these songs. I sing them. I used to sing them songs. Yeah, so now you're on Spotify like, should I do the new album or the old version I used to like? You know what I mean? Like, bro, but you asking her to make a change? How much? Maybe it's that beat, right? I'm just saying stuff to maybe get people to take a step back before they massacre people and not, you know, don't know before you start typing. Because the internet's tough, bro. Gosh dang.
Unless you're coming down on people about using plastic straws, and you know, unless they're not using reusable straws, you can't be typing any hate there. But no, it is fascinating. And what we can see clearly is that it is what we call systemic change, which I think you're right, did feel like a kind of abstract concept, certainly to me, before I started learning about what that really meant. What do we expect to come from COP26? Obviously, we're ambitious that we're going to get big change off the back of this and that all the world leaders and Leonardo DiCaprio will come together and find a solution for this stuff. But really, guys, what kind of tangible goals do you have for the conference?
Shall I go? So it's my first COP, and the whole thing is quite bewildering, to be honest. So I've got like a blue zone pass, so I'm in amongst, you know, thousands of people trying to get a glimpse of Joe Biden and things like that, not managing. But I suppose the key thing for me is it's really about delivery. So in the last panel session, actually, we were talking a bit about India announcing a 2070 net zero target, and that the kind of gall of other countries to be critical of that when they're not exactly decarbonising terribly rapidly themselves. So I think the key thing is that, so climate change is about total carbon emissions. It's not about net zero dates. So it's all about the pathway to getting to zero. So what matters for warming is how much carbon we emit on the way, the area under the curve, cumulative emissions, whatever you want to call it. So what really matters is that you get emissions down really, really quickly. So that all the 2030 chat is much more important than the net zero date. And actually, if you think about organisations, governments being allowed to walk out of COP and have signed up to something in 2030, but they're going back to do stuff in 2021. Like, I think that's what we really want to see, that commitment. And so one of the things that the more vulnerable nations have called for is that instead of this 5-year check-in point that we have at the moment, where we say, well, have we made enough commitment? Have we delivered enough? That starts to happen every year or every couple of years. That's not a whole big shebang COP, but like actually checking on the targets. And I think that's really essential because it's easy to do the target. It's not easy to do the delivery. And so delivery is what I would like to see out of COP. But it's hard because obviously they're not going to decarbonise in 2 weeks. So I think probably a commitment to checking in on that delivery would be really good as a thing to see out of it.
Absolutely. Faye?
I was just going to ask you for a little clarification on something, because you said it's not about net zero, but it's about the 2030 date. So in my mind, those are the same, net zero by 2030. What was the...
Well, so what I mean is, everybody talks about net zero and that mashes together your emissions reduction and some sort of negative emission, like an offset or a capture of carbon. So because those are uncertain, like if you do offsetting, does that tree stay there for long enough? If you're relying on a technology that doesn't yet exist at a global scale to suck carbon out of the air and store it under the ground, like those do not feel like a kind of risk-averse strategy to me. You know, like they don't feel terribly prudent to say, well, we're just going to keep emitting and assume that in the future we'll be able to suck it out of the air. So what I mean about 2030 is, yeah, great, if the net zero target is 2030 and it's a lot of zero and not a lot of net, then yeah, that's what matters. But if you've been carrying emissions on really high and then you're just plugging in some technologies further down the line, you know, what does it really mean in terms of where emissions will be, where CO2 concentrations will be? I think that's much less clear. So what I want to see is actual emissions reductions. And for most countries, that will still be what we're looking at 2030. They won't have hit zero carbon, but you want them a lot closer. And so when the 1.5 degree report came out from the IPCC, it was about halving global emissions by 2030 or 45% by 2030. So that emissions trajectory, that's what I would like to see really coming down. We've talked so much at all these COPs and all about the existential threat of climate change, and global emissions have only gone up. You know, all the way. So that's, you know, we need to see that curve bending globally, and we need to see real emissions reductions, not commitments to offsetting.
AY, Faye, anything else to add to that?
I'm really optimistic generally, so I try and just like, if all these countries are getting together to save the world's forests, I want to believe that's going to happen. So that's what I'm focusing my manifestation energy onto. But I think it's easy to be cynical, but I think it's not necessarily enormously useful. So it's probably more useful to then find out what those pledges are and really try and hold your governments to account on it. And yeah, I mean, we're all asking our governments to create a net zero target, and that's super important. But I think maybe it's also time to look at our own footprints and like work out our own individual plans to net zero by a certain time. So that involves measuring, it involves really thinking about what is it that you do that actually creates the most emissions and less. And that's a lot of research for a lot of people. So maybe that's something we can all start doing together.
Can I answer that too? Do we have time or something? Okay, I'm thinking in my mind like, dang. Okay, so first of all, everyone's asking me that question, and you know, it's interesting. I think I was talking to Timo about this. I don't know what Timo from the Global Goes Music Roadshow. What's up, bro? But I'll say this, because I've been in the Blue Room like every day, right? I mean, there's Prince Charles right there, you know, all these people, and yesterday I was in the lunch line. And this dude comes up to me and it's the other guy in the office. Because like in the Envoy office, there's like Jay Athma, right? And then there's like Sydney and this dude Joseph. It was the first time I seen him because it's been a pandemic. I ain't seen nobody, you know. And he comes, hey, wow, I'm so happy you're here. I'm like, oh man, I'm so happy to hear. Where are the other young leaders? You know what I'm saying? And before I came, you know, on the news, it's like, this is the young leaders, you know. And I was like, where are the young leaders? Where's Vanessa Nakate? Where's, you know, I'm like feeling alone in this, because that mug is huge. This is like universe. He said, AY, you're the only young leader here. You're the only one they gave a pass to out of 17 young leaders. Like there's 17 global goals. Like I just want you guys, listen to what I'm saying. 17 global goals, 17 young leaders from Amina, right? I'm the only one here. So when people are, you're just asking me, how do you think COP's going? They're talking about youth. I'm like, that's what I'm saying. I must be
The voice of youth.
I'm just different, man. Like this is my first time at COP. Like I said, I just got in this position. Like I'm used to like doing a concert and then like sending one person, one village, like a box, access to energy or whatever, right? You know, we've been getting the world plugged in for years. Like, or I'm in Honduras in a village doing a concert. I'm actually not used to so much talking. Like, it's weird to me, bro. Like, you know, I'd be walking down and I hear somebody saying, yeah, we got to get our banner on that thing. And I'm like looking at the thing, it's like this big. I'm like, dang, that must be like $1 million. And I'm thinking to myself, like, bro, I'm doing concerts. We get like maybe $900 donations because everybody uses Venmo and everything now. They don't even have cash. It's like, I'm scrambling to build a box for 500. I'm thinking to myself, dude, that village in Haiti, bro, you probably with the banner, if you downsize that mug, you probably could get like 100 people fed. You know, so it's so weird to me. I saw the McDonald's people there, they're awesome. I was like, I just don't know what's happening, to be very honest. So when you're like, well, what's your thing for COP? Like, but people like Timo give me faith, right? Because he's pulling people in the room, giving platforms to, you know, people that have voices, young leaders, different companies and organizations. I've seen like so many different like inner like collaborations that are going on even outside the Blue Room. You know, people getting together, making impact, ideas for us as a company that like funded somebody, something to get help in Kenya or something. Like that's what's giving me hope. You know what I'm saying? You know, so I think that's just my explanation. I don't know. I'm not saying anything, but I'm also trying to say something at the same time.
I think you said a lot of good stuff there, so don't worry about it, AY. Yeah, I mean, just the work that you do is just brilliant. I just want to know even more. Yeah.
It's like, I'm happy to be here, and Extreme's dope, and you're dope. You guys are dope as hell, right?
Get that in writing. Right, guys, we've got some questions now. We've got some questions from online, but I wanted to first turn to our audience here and ask if anybody has anything to ask our wonderful panel. Yes.
Hello, thank you for that. That was some wonderful conversation. I enjoyed it a lot. I don't want to sound negative, but one thing I've noticed being here is the conspicuancy of the absence of big music companies. Like, where's Apple? Where's Spotify? Where's Universal? This is the biggest, like, environmental event this Britain has ever seen, generationally. And where are you? And these guys, they're the companies that are paying artists 0.0027 pence a play. So, you know, that's 50 times cheaper than a single piece of chewing gum. And we're talking about, and I'm just wanting to ask you guys, are you feeling that absence too? That's really what I wanted to know.
That's a great question. Who wants to take this question first? AY, come on, I know you got something to say about this.
I was talking to Dave Graham yesterday. Look him up, one of the biggest festivals in the world he puts on. And I was like, man, where you at COP? And he's like knee-deep working, wants to be here, but knee-deep working. Not sure if he got the invite, right? I already talked about me being the only young leader of the 17 here. Exactly, bro. Right, but when you think about it, where's Sony, right? Maybe they are here. I don't know. But Warner, where's, you know? But I'll say one more thing to answer your question. And just move on to the next question. I was having a conversation. Who is this with? I was talking to a manager in the music industry, one of the biggest in the world, right? And I was pitching what I'm doing. And the guy that was helping me pitch was like, man, not only like, because we already have like 3 songs from the project. So it's like, oh, the Head and Heart's one of the biggest artists in the world, right? I mean, you know, we already have Tech Nine, the #1 independent artist in the world. Like, I've already plugged in 17 countries. So the guy's like explaining that to this guy. He was like, yeah, and he does, all of his concerts are powered by renewable energy. And then the dude, who's older and very seasoned, was like, oh, hey, that's not possible. You can't power a concert just with renewable energy. It's not reliable. And he was like, no, he's doing that. And he was like, no, I mean, you can't do that. I mean, it's not. And then he was like, yeah, well, he's done like almost 900. And the guy still didn't get it.
What kind of proof did he want?
I don't know. I mean, you know, I'm not sure how plugged in. You know, I think that those guys that are running the business, you know, that you don't normally know their name, and I think their daughter is like on TikTok, like, posting a Greta Thunberg, you know, like I think like maybe they're making some different changes in their routine. You know, I think maybe their son could help them give insight on, Dad, you should do, but I'm not sure if they're all plugged in yet, bro. And that's my thought.
You've seen that shift over the decade that you've been doing it. Only the last 2 years, if you know, you've said that you've.
And I'm still knocking on the door. Yeah. All right, and it's still like, hey, you know. Oh, that's let's put this. It's an interesting, but hey, right? Steps. I just hope that we take the regenerative steps as fast as possible.
Faye, Carly, have you felt that absence yourself? Do you have anything to add?
I do now. Hayden's mentioned it. I didn't think about it before, and I actually don't know what. Maybe you know this. What the involvement of sort of huge businesses is in COP. Are they here? Are they allowed to be here? Is it?
Oh yeah, they're here.
So like Apple, Google, Spotify.
Yeah, so I mean, like some of them have like pavilions and stuff in the COP space, and then they're sponsoring things around the place and things like that. I mean, I suppose it doesn't. To me, it doesn't matter whether they're at COP. It matters whether they're helping this agenda, and maybe if some of the ones you're flagging aren't here, maybe they didn't have a story to tell at COP that worked. And I suppose, how can we as a community put more pressure on them so that they do have a story to tell in the next 12 months, so that they've got a plan for it. But yeah, I mean, I think there is this default I mentioned before of kind of going to the artist and like having a lot of responsibility in the artist, but actually, exactly as you say, that it's those wider voices in the industry that we need to make sure are engaged, and that we don't kind of let them off with saying, oh, it's just not possible, kind of really quite old thinking. And I think the key thing about like what you're doing and what other artists are doing is to be able to say that it is possible because I did it. Now, you've met a particularly intransigent fellow who, even when you've done it, still hasn't believed you, which is curious. But I think demonstrating that things actually work. So not waiting for the permission of these like big, you know, the controllers to tell you that you can do it, but to demonstrate people want it, or we did it, or we piloted it and now we can do it somewhere else. That's really powerful. Because I feel like when we've said before that, you know, artists could be traveling on the train, for example, people quite often like roll their eyes as if like we're just silly academics, which may well be true. But I have the example of Massive Attack actually traveling on the train. So it is possible. It's not, you know, it has been done. And I think the same for you with your concerts. So yeah, I agree with you that I would like to hear more from them, and I'd like them to have a really great story to tell that they wanted to be here communicating at COP.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. Any other questions from the audience here today?
What up, guys? We're here right now.
I know that Millie has some questions from online, so we'll go to you, Millie, in the front row.
Yep, some really interesting questions coming through. One in particular, One Young World Ambassador Leah from Malta, saying, what can young people do to push the music industry towards greater sustainability?
I can speak to that. First of all, you can get in touch with your local venue and say, I don't want to use reusable plastic, you know, single-use plastic cups. Hang on, got the right one. You can ask your favourite artist to have more sustainable merch, you can just use your voice. If you want to decrease your footprint, you can, as you were saying earlier, travel by public transport to the gigs. Have you got more to add?
I've got more to add. No, I think those are all really good, and I think it's about also about celebrating and amplifying good stuff. So when an artist you really like does something that you think's good and you've had a good poke about in it and you think, yep, this is about emissions reduction, not offsets, and then saying yeah, this is great and I really like it. Let them know you like it, or the venue that's done it, or that, because so that we're celebrating the stuff that demonstrates that your guy's wrong, that you meant, that said that we can't do it.
I brought an artist here, her name's Rain Stern, right? She was on The Voice, Team Nick Jonas last year. She was the only one that was really talking about climate, right? And it's an artist like that, and she actually does make great music. Let's share it. You don't have to share my stuff because I'm telling you to share. I'm oh, he's making a shout out for his music. You know what I'm saying? It's the fact of what I'm representing could inspire youth to do more. And so, maybe just share that instead of, this record that's about twerking. I don't know, right? Maybe we could just make some certain choices, It's not that music isn't bad. I don't want to party and dance. I'm just saying, we are elevating things that don't have to do with this, so,
Speaking about the influence that artists have, but also the influence that someone whose opinion that you trust has when they're sharing this information about an artist that's maybe doing amazing work that people wouldn't necessarily know about otherwise. That's super powerful as well, just from an individual's perspective. Sorry, Faye, I cut you off there, so I'll let you. No, Carly, were you?
I was just going to say that I think as well that there's a lot of focus on youth at this COP. There's also a lot of focus on lots of youth voices not being able to access the official bits of COP. But I think, what's exciting at the moment, I think, around climate action is that loads of people are trying different stuff. And if you think you know the one way to sort this out, I hope you're right and I hope you make it happen. But I feel everybody, we've got to pull in the same direction with all our kind of different ideas. I think as a kind of green movement, really good at criticising each other and not paying attention to the thing that's pulling in the completely opposite direction over here. And it's really great for them if we kind of argue amongst ourselves. So if we can all be pulling kind of in that direction as a collective, but for the youth sort of I think the question was young people, what they can do. I think if I'd been asked before the Extinction Rebellion stuff getting really high on the agenda and the climate strikes, I think I would have thought in my kind of jaded, been doing this for quite a long time view, that I wouldn't have been sure it made, that it would be that effective. And look at what it's done. That youth voice is just calling out decades of the adults being yeah, this is really important, we're really getting on with it, whilst global emissions just continue to rise. So again, it's you can do all those things on a kind of individual level, but also that wider collective, that youth movement, that just keep telling people that it's not good enough. I mean, that's an exhausting job to have, but it's really powerful, I think, at the moment, and it actually empowers kind of other older people to say it too, I think. So there's loads that young people have already done, and it really shouldn't have been their job to have to do it, but they've had a huge impact.
Of course you can. Yeah.
And it's not just for young people, anyone can do them, but something we always recommend that people do, and it's particularly good if you're young and you're just at the age where you might be opening a bank account, choosing your first credit card, is research those companies. There's a thing called switchit.money. I think that's UK based at the moment. You can go on Ethical Consumer or just Google it and you'll find a way to find out what each bank whether they invest in fossil fuels or not, basically. And some banks are absolutely terrible and some banks are a lot better. So when you're young and you're just starting out, it doesn't really matter who you bank with. Banks are banks, so you can just pick one that doesn't put your money into the fossil fuel industry. You can also obviously consider a more plant-based diet, and probably your parents will end up eating that as well because you all eat the same meals. So that can ripple through just beyond yourself. And yeah, just keep shouting about wanting change because it really does. We've spoken to so many people who've been influenced by their children in all walks of the music industry. So your voice does count.
So Sure, you've got a lot of power there, you know, really. I mean, if I was eating a plant-based diet at home, Mum would soon be on it as well. And it's so easy, because who wants to cook 2 dinners? Goodness me, it's a lot of effort. I think we've probably got time for one more question from... yeah. Oh, sorry, Millie. One more question from the floor, apologies.
I really like the idea of expanding outside of the youth as well, because I think that's a great one. Further than banks, I think the share action's a really good one. Go one step further, one up. Get involved in share action, where you can actually buy one share of a company, you can get a voice at the shareholder. All these big companies, the ones you want to disrupt. So that's a great tip, a great organisation. I just wanted to ask all of you, there's a bit of a bubble between the blue zone, the green zone, and all the fringe stuff. So who would you like, all 3 of the panels, to come out of the green and the blue zone down here to Extreme Hangouts, to hang out tomorrow, maybe some other time, and change things? So
Who?
I was thinking, like, I mean, we've got Stella McCartney, we've got DiCaprio, we've got all these VIPs sort of still in the bubble, right? Mm-hmm. How do we get them out of the bubble down here and talking to the real people? They're going to make the changes.
Yeah, right. I love that. That's a clap. I mean, but you just said it. I mean, you said it yourself. I mean, I'm at the Blue Zone every day, and we've actually started inviting a lot of people, you know, and so I'm basically using music as a vehicle. Like, oh, AY, I'm performing, I'll be extreme, you know, come through, you know, because music is a way to say, okay, you know. But I agree that should be happening, and I think that some of these leaders and people need to be at the fringe events and the green events, right, and things like that. So I mean, yes, bro, like we have to connect. I mean, I think it's wonderful. Yeah, I think it's one, and I feel like that all the people in charge of the Blue Zone and the Green Zone, you know, really honestly should be communicating with some of these fringe events and stuff and trying to get. We gotta build bridges. To me, this looks exactly like the world that has been failing us in the sense of all of these silos. You called it bubbles.
One name. Who do you want down here? Come on, one name.
Antonio Guterres would be cool, right? Wouldn't that be awesome?
Well, there's so many. I mean, Christiana Figueroa is just because I'd like to hang out with her. But I think just the least likely person to come here, I don't know who they are, but the person who is least likely to come here, I think they should come here. Someone from very uptight, kind of, been in a suit since the day they were born, and doesn't think that everyone in the world wants the same thing, thinks everything's siloed, and it would be great to change their mind, whoever they are.
I think you want people whose names you don't know. I think you want the negotiators here, because those world leaders are stepping up and, you know, talking to a brief. So I don't know what their names are, but I would like the people who are in the rooms making the deals to be as engaged outside the bubble as they are in.
I think that that's a lovely note to end our discussion on. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone for turning up, and also thank you to our amazing panel. My goodness me. Dr. Carly McLaughlin, Faye Milton, and of course AY Young. Thank you so much to OVO and Extreme Hangout for allowing us to have this conversation. It's been a privilege to chat to you guys. It's been fantastic. So you can watch online, and obviously make sure that you stay tuned for more events throughout the course of COP26. Thank you very much.